All right. Hello, everyone. It's good to be here today with all of you ready, I think, to learn a little bit more about where we are at Visible Network Labs with our partner platform. So it's really good to see some old familiar faces and a lot of new people as well. So thanks for being here. The very first thing I will ask everyone to do is say hello in the chat. Let us know who you are, why you might be here, and anything you want to show off or brag about yourself. Feel free to add your websites. One thing I can guarantee is everyone who is here is probably some kind of network builder or weaver in their community, or supporting the people who do that. So always good to have this kind of community together, even for just a short hour. Okay, so I'm Danielle Varda. I am the CEO and founder at Visible Network Labs, and just so pleased to have everyone here today joining us on introducing our Partner 2.0 platform. If you have known us for a long time, you know that we're kind of a scrappy small company. Our primary way that we work is in partnership with community, letting community guide us every step of the way, telling us what it is that they are hopeful they will see in this, giving us feedback. And it's just been a real joy being able to work that way and be able to hear feedback and get ideas from people. And today is what we're showing you is just a result of all of that. Okay, so I'm going to go forward, but please, again, put your name and questions, who you are, in the chat. And especially if you do have questions and there's things that you specifically want to see today, let us know, and I'll make sure to address that. Alex is kind of my partner here in crime and getting all this work done. And so he's going to be able to ping me and let me know if there's something important I need to address. We have a few other folks from our Visible Network Labs team here. So let me just get started. Visible Network Labs is an organization that is committed to strengthening social connectedness at the individual and systems levels. And we do that by using network science to bring technology and data to communities in order to help build their capacity to do this good work of collaboration and partnership building to reach outcomes such as health, wellness, and mental health outcomes, among all kinds of other things. Our primary kind of thing we do is we make invisible networks visible. So we have seen the power of that. We've seen kind of not just the curiosity that comes from seeing these relationships visualized, but also the aha moments for when people really get to start to understand something that they might have intuitively known or felt throughout this whole process that they're working through. And so we have just seen the power of making invisible networks visible. And so that's what we do. I will note, we don't just do network mapping, though. I always say the network map is like the front cover of the story of the network. And then you open the map and you get to read all of the details about it. And that's what we hope we can do, is bring good measurement to those maps so that we can tell good stories, link it to outcomes, but probably most importantly, develop action steps and strategies that help us get to where we want to be. I could not do this alone. I have this extraordinary team. We are small but mighty. But I will kind of point out, at Visible Network Labs, we have a whole data science and implementation team. And we've really built this technology to wrap around the data science and implementation of the work. So whether you're doing that or we're doing that with you in partnership with the community, this is where we try to develop really strong, valid measures for this kind of thing, and turn it into actionable insights. So really, the translating the data into practice is the reason we do this. It's the insights as a service part of our organization. And these folks are made up of network scientists, data analysts. I know Andy's here on the call. And we really pride ourselves on trying to listen to community of what they really need and trying to give that back to them. We also have our in-house development team and product team that is actually building the technology. So we're real unusual in that we're not just building technology, but we're doing it from a research lens, a human-centered design lens. and translating that into technology. So I'd love for all of you to join some of our work meetings where you see the data science and development team working together in tandem. It's pretty fascinating. So we're really proud of that uniqueness. And then Alex, you'll see here, who runs this. You get a lot of emails from him. He is our marketing and communications person and does a really great job and all that. All right, so we're here today to talk about the partner platform and specifically a community partner relationship management system. I'm going to go ahead and play this. People like to see information in different ways. It's less than a minute, but it's a little video that kind of introduces it. So I'm just going to start with that. Okay. So this is always a little reminder for me to slow down a little bit because I get real excited about what we do and I can just move right on pretty quickly. I know we're doing a tech demo and I'm going to show you the platform, but one thing we've learned is if we really don't dig into a little bit of the why or the problem that we're trying to solve, it's really difficult to understand why a technology might be useful. So we really want to center on the problem that we're trying to solve for just a few minutes. We use the term community partner relationship management, not only as a term to describe our platform, but really as a practice. People who are using CPRM are really engaged in the practice of tracking members of an ecosystem, their attributes, and then the relationships between them. And what we know is that that's helpful, but why? We hope that means we can empower the network to engage in database decision-making, identify gaps, create opportunities, and engage in strategic collaboration. So this is a term that we hope actually grows in a way, but it's something that we've seen folks use a little bit more and more, and it's actually what we call our platform. And it is a little bit of a play on a CRM. A CRM, as many of you know, is a customer relationship management system, and CRMs are built to primarily track customers and convert them into paying customers. And so while a lot of people in communities are using CRMs to track their partners, the functionality of it is not really useful for the kind of work we're trying to do, where we're trying to build partnerships and bring all those folks together. So we started talking about a CPRM, Community Partner Relationship Management System, as a solution that helps to fill in some of the gaps that a CRM cannot. So most of our users have a CRM. They might be bringing their data into the CPRM, or some might even be using two at the same time. So so there's lots of different ways and use cases, and we'll talk about some of those today. We do use network science as a framework to track ecosystems and networks, and I am going to spend just a second on this. If you've seen me present, you've seen this slide before, but really the reason that we're here is because we know there is just a way of working, the network way of working, that is pretty prolific across almost every sector now. This slide at one point said a new norm, or a new paradigm, and now it's just really a norm. People are expected to work across sectors, almost no matter if they're in the public, private, or nonprofit sector. But what we've learned is that because we're human, people think we can just do connections as at work well. We can just build relationships. I personally find relationship management one of the hardest things about life. So bringing it into your workspace is not as intuitive as some of us might think. And for folks like me, I'm quite an introvert, actually. So the idea of building a huge network is pretty overwhelming. So what we know is that people need tools and ways to figure out how do we do this, but not necessarily always do more of it. And one thing I always like to kind of point out here is COVID really made us all network scientists just overnight. We were told very quickly, build a network strategy. Who should you connect with? What are the costs and benefits of that? How do I develop my network? Am I going to reach out or have a closed pod? And what are my risks? Which really gave us like a universal language to talk about the kind of thing that we at Visible Network Labs and a lot of you on the call do every day. And these maps that you see here are literally from media reports. So people started seeing network maps in ways they had never before. So the way people can consume network data today is different than in the decades of my career in this, in a way that's made it possible for us to actually have more data that makes sense to people. But all that said, we might think, right, so networks are the answer. You'll see, we love this little image. It's our exploding brain network builder in the middle there, who's basically overwhelmed. So when I go into community, I'll always ask people, how many of you are in a network? And everyone raises their hand because that's why they're there. And then I'll say, how many of you are in 4 networks or 5 or 10, and you see a lot of hand raises. And what we have learned is that many people have started to get really overwhelmed and confused by why we're in so many of these different configurations, and if they are actually helping. So what we know, as these get more complicated, it can be hard to tell if it's even working, but we're investing tons of time and money in this. So what we're trying to do is figure out, how do we actually build these networks of partners and be able to do some of these things, like track who's already connected to whom, who's exchanging resources, identifying gaps, finding redundancies so we can do less of it, and leveraging assets and opportunities. And so what we know is that we have a lot of it going on. There's no common database, common data set for people to do this work. And so we're constantly collecting new information about every single use case. And so one of the things that our 2.0 is really meant to address is, how do we actually get more of these complex data into one place to track over time and be able to track, where members of it are at different points in those different ecosystems. And that's been a huge endeavor on our team's part to try to build a data infrastructure that captures all of those things, but make it not as complicated for you all to use. These are questions that someone sent in about something they were interested in for their organization. And so we just kind of turned that problem into these questions that we might be able to answer. So with the kind of data that we can get from this, we can not just see networks, but we can use it to solve some of these problems, especially identifying like who's missing and how do we build strategies to kind of leverage what we do have instead of always trying to just have more of it. And we're going to share these slides. So a lot of folks are trying to figure out, why would I use something like this? So we put this together to really help folks think about different ways that they might apply what they're learning, not only for the whole network, but for their own staff and their organizations, for partners in the community, for whole ecosystems. And one of the things we have built this tool around is the philosophy of really a democratization of data. We just fundamentally believe if we collect data from community, we should have different ways to give it back to them. So you'll see when I do the demo, we've created a number of features that allow the user to give data back to the community, back to the network members, because what we know is that while we're trying to create a collective good, no one is really going to engage in it unless they can also see the benefits to their own organization and their own work. And we believe that's okay. We want people to be able to build their own capacity, because as each individual member of the network is building capacity, it's building capacity of a larger collective. So our solution has been to build out the Partner platform. Partner is actually an acronym that stands for the Program to Analyze, record, and track networks to enhance relationships. That's one of the first things we did. We built Partner with funding from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation quite a number of years ago and have built it out over time. We don't have big investors or anything like that. It's literally been by working through grants and contracts with partners in the community who've helped us build it out to really bring these actionable insights powered by network science. So here's a little sneak peek of, kind of what it looks like, but we'll get more into that in a minute. The very last thing I'll say before I get into the demo, I've mentioned a few times that we use network science as a framework. So network science is really the science of how things are connected. It's one of the most human, tangible sciences that exist, because as a human being, you are doing network science all day long. Right now, your perception of me, my perception of you, our building of relationships over Zoom or in person, it's all network science. It's all this kind of wonderment and curiosity about how we connect, what that means, what's the quality of that. All of that work that we do all day long to just live and be human is network science. And so one of the things we try to really emphasize is that you are already a network scientist, and the way that you think is the way that we are trying to build out this platform. We're just trying to put some data behind it. So towards that end, I always spend just a second to say, you will hear me say the word networks throughout this whole presentation. I say that, and you can be building a collective impact or a joint initiative or a partnership. We use the word network because we measure these as nodes and lines. So the circles and the maps that you see can be organizations or people. In the bigger ecosystem kind of framework people use, those can be events or places, all kinds of things, whatever we want to conceptualize it as. The lines between them are the relationships between them. And that's how we understand how they're connected. How that is defined depends on what you want to see. So one of the nice things about the Partner CPRM is that it comes embedded with years of research and hard work to develop measures. We have measures of trust. I'll kind of show you how that looks in the platform. Value of partnerships. We measure a lot of perceptions of things like the quality of the relationship, the outcome of the relationship, attribution of the building the relationship to some kind of intervention. So we've done years of work on building these really high quality measures, and we bring them into the tool. But it also has a lot of flexibility for you to define it, especially to meet your own needs of your community and the context in which you are working around this. And this last slide I'll show you. And it's funny because I will say, Andy asked me, why are we still using this old version of it? And there is something that I'm a little attached to. It's one of the first slides I ever made to explain to a group of mathematicians at the Rand Corporation where I was working, why communities would care about network science. So let me walk through this real quick, and then I promise to get to the demo. But here in this slide, if you look towards the center and see these squares and circles, a lot of us, this is our community. Let's say these are organizations. We build, one thing I didn't say, everyone who comes to this work, we are not trying to convince you to build a network strategy. Everyone who comes here has already decided they want to implement a network strategy. That's been our experience. So what's happened is a lot of our users have already gone through phase one, where they've said, we want to build something new, exciting. And they they bring all their usual, suspects together, and they'll always make a list of who's not at the table. Very quickly, like meeting two, we'll start inviting those people in. That's network building. That is what the essence of it all is, bringing people together who are not already connected. Phase three is where we meet almost everybody. It is where folks have done that work, they know what they want to do, and their strategy is to grow the network. There's often an organization who is in charge of everything. Sometimes we call them a backbone. We have a lot of organizations that are connected. They meet a lot. They're on a listserv. But what happens is they're getting fatigued. And often we don't know why we're still meeting and we're not seeing outcomes. We know about this. We've known about this problem for a long time. Elinor Ostrom, who won the Nobel Prize for Economics, told us that when we do collective action, there's a risk of free riders, and people not really understanding how they can contribute. So our goal is to get into something like phase four. Oh, something I didn't say is all these squares and circles are in the exact same spot. in every picture. So the only thing that is changing is how they're connecting. So in phase 4, this is just an example. It can look any way. Let's say the same group has built out 4 work focus areas. They have 4 folks, they have decentralized who's in control and has power. Let's say these folks meet very often, but these folks only meet once a week, maybe once a month, quarterly and annually. And on once a year, everyone comes together. What we've learned, and we call this a life cycle of a sustainable network, is that over time, if we can reduce the amount of work and ask the amount of resources needed to maintain these networks, building on the trust that we have established, we can actually get people to stay along for the work longer. So in this strategy, we recommend everyone have a role and they know when they need to play it and are invited then. The network has stated what the end of the network is. Maybe it's perpetual, but maybe it ends when we reach an outcome. And that we actually have a goal of reaching the same collaborative advantage, but with fewer amounts of resources needed, because your funder is going to go away, people get tired. And so our goal is to help people build out the data that they need to build strategies that are sustainable and effective. So that's really our goal. That's why we do this work. And we just happen to have built a whole platform around this concept. So I like to spend a few minutes to really dig into the why, the problem, and the approach, because otherwise it's just a technology. So I'm going to go ahead and show the CPRM now. And I'll walk through it. And if there are any, just checking to make sure there's not any outstanding questions. If there's questions that you have as I'm going through this, please let me know. You can pop it into the chat as well. So I'm just doing a little checking of all of that, but it's so great to see you all here. I'm just really excited, especially we have some friends here who have been partner users for many, many years, and it's just really nice to see you all come back and celebrate this kind of new part of our work with us. All right, so what I would encourage everyone to do is register for Partner. If you haven't already, go in and register. There's things you can do without ever having to pay or use any special, have a project yourself to even do it. So when you log in, you're going to see a page like this. So this page is going to evolve over time. Eventually, it's going to have some of your network, your ecosystem insights on it. Right now, it's kind of a static page, but we're building this out. So again, if you have ideas of what you'd love to see on these pages, reach out to us. But I want to point out over here just some resources. So we have a lot of resources on network science, using data, building strategies, all kinds of things, stories. So make sure and check those out. But I want to point out these practices. We have within the CPRM a couple of data sets that you can go in and practice with. So Andy's built this one, which is our Snow White example. I'm just going to click on it. It's actually going to take you to a page that gives you instructions on how to use the data to map out members of Snow White's social network. And it's a story that many of us are familiar with, and I think you'll be really happy to go through this. It's kind of one of our fun ways of bringing network science into just everyday thinking. So these are the instructions, but to find it, the instructions will be in there. You'll actually go here into your CPRM and the data set will be available for you. Same thing for this community network. This one is a little more serious in terms of actually it takes a little bit longer, and it has some real examples of using data and the measures in our platform. Okay, so that's just here. What I'd like to point out here on the left side, this whole bar here is what we refer to as your ecosystem area. Something that is different than it has ever been for Partner is that, and if you've used it before, you'll know that you come in and you can set up a network, measure it, collect data on it, and then see the results. If you wanted to do a second network, you had to create a new project. Well, what we heard from people was that it was challenging when you had members of your ecosystem that were in multiple networks. And so what we have worked really hard to do, and it's very much on the back end, so you may not see it, but it's one of our things that we're most proud of. We've made it so that you have members here at the ecosystem. Like if I click on this, you'll see a list of them. These members can appear in all of your different networks, and the system will always know that Danielle Varda is Danielle Varda. So the nice thing about that is you can now track members of your ecosystem as they appear in different networks over different periods of time. So we can manage it all in one place, kind of like if you're doing work in a community, let's say, for example, with patients, and we're working together with all of our different organizations and pulling our hair out because patients are not tracked across all of our systems, right? So patients are appearing differently and we can't cross all of their information. That problem is the problem we were trying to solve. How do we take a member of an ecosystem and track them no matter where they appear? So that's what's happening over here at this side of things. So I can always look at my members over here. I can also look at other things at my ecosystem level, like questions. I might have a set of questions I want to send out to members of my ecosystem to like in a survey. And what I do is I would build them out over here. And what's nice about this is where you can have if I add a question, I can add my own question, or I can add questions from the partner library of questions. And so that's where I was saying we bring a lot of our measures in. So when you build these out, you don't have to start from scratch, but you can start from scratch if you'd like to. So if you want to build out a new relational question, you can do that all kinds of different ways. And then we can also group them so that we can have them. I can say, I want to put, 5 of my questions together into a group, and I would create, let's say, my trust questions. And when I come here, I can go then and build them out as a new group. So that's kind of fun. That's, again, at the ecosystem level. We have email templates. One of the things we assume is that you're trying to communicate with people in your networks, in your community. So these are ways that you can come here and add new templates and schedules and things like that for communicating with people. But something very different from a CRM. CRMs are, again, meant to convert people to paying customers. So a key component of a CRM is to track who opens your emails, right? Like you want to follow how many links they clicked on. We don't provide that because that's not actually our goal. Our goal is to engage people, to invite them to engage in this process, invite them to see their data. So the email system is much more used for community communication than tracking. We have the analyzer, which happens at the ecosystem level. And then we also have reports. And I'm going to show you the analyzer at a capture level, but over here, this is really nice because this is a place you can just begin to build a report. And when you build out your report, what you can do is bring in data from all different parts of your system. So as you're capturing data and finding it, you can take pictures of it and store it. And then when you come over here, you can start to build out a report template. So, you can add charts and graphs, and it'll allow you to find the place that you want to pull them in from. So what that allows you to do is build these templates for reports that you can come back to and start to visualize. I just added that chart. I just didn't tell it where to bring the chart in from. So there's a little bit of flexibility in that, and that allows you to build quick reports, templates that you can use like over time and things like that. There's a couple other things here, but I'll show you that in just another way. So that's our ecosystem side of things, but something that's changed from our legacy to our 2.0 is what we call networks. So we used to call these projects or collaboratives. We now refer to them as captures, like a data capture. And the reason for that is that what we know is that while we have our setup at the ecosystem level, so this is the first thing you'll do is set up all your ecosystem stuff, and you can always add to it. Oh, and I should add, a lot of our users have a list somewhere of their partners. They're either in their CRMs already, or they just have a spreadsheet on their laptop. So what we do help a lot of folks do is bring in their lists, bring in all the attributes, all the data that they have. We have a health department right now that is just starting to use this as their kind of knowledge management tool across the health department. And as you can imagine, they have lists across many different members of their health department. So one of the first things that Visible Network Labs is doing is helping them get those lists into one list with the attributes that we want to track. We'll upload it into here. So the very first thing they'll have is a list of members with all the attributes that they want, able to filter them. So like a CRM, they'll be able to really manage all the members in their community. So that's one way to get everything in. Once everything is in there, we want to capture new data about them. So a capture allows us to really go into a subsystem of that ecosystem. You can see here, I use this for demos, right? But one thing I might do is I might say, I want to create a new capture. And it was from my demo on 11/15. So when I create a new capture, I can say, I want to pick who was at that demo. So I can pick the people, they have to be in my ecosystem, or I can select all of them. And then I can say, I want to, ask them all my trust questions from this question group, or I might want to pick different questions to ask them. So once I do that, I've set up a new capture where I can collect data. So here's my new capture. I only have a few people in it. Nobody's answered a question. So that's an example of how to use the captures to create something new. Our users vary. Some are only using this for one data collection a year. Others are using it very frequently. Like I'd like to capture every Friday all my relationships from the week. Versus, or we just had an event and I want to send a quick survey out to folks. So regardless, that's where all of this kinds of things happen. And if I want, I can just delete one and say, I don't want it in my ecosystem anymore. Okay, so what I'm going to do though is go to one of these, this one down here. This is a real data set with a use case around early childhood in Montana. All that said, it's anonymized, so you won't be able to see anyone in there. So what I just did is I clicked on my capture. If I'm just getting started, this is where I would go and build out my question set. So what I would do here is I can bring in instructions or consents, but this whole group here, all my questions live in my ecosystem. But what I would do here is I build out the question set for this particular group, this capture. So that's where they are here. So let's say you're just doing one survey a year of your network. You might have a very long survey like this with all these questions. And again, they're populated with our partner questions as well. And then the emails is where I could come and start to schedule using my templates that I created in my ecosystem to schedule communications with them. Where I'm going to go to, though, is members for a moment. So now I have all the members that came from my ecosystem that I've put into this one capture. So I can see them here. And again, these are anonymized. But in this case, I will have asked them to engage in some data collection. So just to put that into like real world, often what we have is like an initiative, in this case, an early childhood council of sorts. And they wanted to do an annual survey where they could understand how folks were connected and use the data to really build out their strategies for the coming year. So our goal was to ask them to answer a survey. So this version of the capture that's our most common use case in the partner tool is that people wanting to ask a set of questions of people out in the community. The example that I just showed you where I said, let me capture my meeting that I just had with all of you all, I might open that, pick all of you and say that we were all together in a meeting so I can capture that we were in a demo together. So that's a little bit different. One would be me as in an organization capturing my relationships every day, much more like an organizational management tool. This use case that I'm showing you is much more of an evaluative or one-time kind of survey. The thing is that most of our users do these over time now. So in this case, what I'm looking at is seeing who said yes and became engaged in my work. When I see this one particular organization, let's say I click on them, what's opening is what we call a member profile. So member profile is taking a second because it's bringing in data from all parts of our system, and then it builds out a profile of that organization. So now we're starting at the organizational level. These are templates. You build them just like the reports I showed you. And so you decide what you put in each block. One thing you'll see here, this says understanding your network maps. The reason that we have this language here, there's two choices for member profiles. You can have an internal view where only you and your users who are own these data see, and you can put all the data you want in there about that particular user. We also have this as a public facing version. So this is an example of a public facing member profile that you could save as a PDF or send a link to this organization. So within this profile, this particular one, there's instructions for if someone was reading this from the public, they might understand what they're seeing. So you'll see within the profile, there are network maps that show them and how they are connected to others in this network, maybe basic information about them. If they did answer any questions, we can see what they said. If we've used our trust and value scores or others, we can see them also. This is one of our actually most popular features, the member profiles. And the reason I say that is I mentioned that we strongly believe that if we ask community for data, we should have ways to give it back to them. And I said we've built features to do that. This we built so that we could not just have an internal way to look up a member, but a way to say thank you to people for giving information. So we encourage these get shared. And what we've seen organizations do with these data is, for example, every funder asks them to apply for funding by telling them how they're engaged in partnerships, how they're connected in community. This gives them data to put into their grant applications. And we've heard major foundations saying some organizations and communities are using these data to just tell their stories, to make their case and hopefully get funding. So in that way, we're building capacity of people to be more competitive, to get the funding that they need for their programs. And it's a thank you for just giving information. I will say this is not required. You do not have to share your data externally with anyone, but our team is committed to building more and more ways that the data can be public. So that's a member profile. And it's built out by putting attributes in, uploading data, asking people to answer questions. The background of that looks like this, and it can be filled with all kinds of different attributes or information about them that you can tag, and all of that gets put into their member profile and used throughout the platform. I'm just going to check. I see a couple of questions. Thank you, Dave, for putting some questions in. Okay, I see the first one was about, have you discovered typical lengths of these life cycle phases for networks? I know you're referring to the slide of the sustainable networks life cycle. I cannot say that we have any good science on that. One thing that I have learned, though, is people usually go through phase 1 and 2 fairly quickly because people are very used to bringing, partners together now. I think people stay in phase 3 forever. Most networks never leave phase 3. They just stay there with a more is better approach, trying everything they can to make it work. And a lot make it work, and a lot are struggling. So I think what does happen is that when they get to phase 4, that's a life cycle in itself, is the constant collecting of these data, using them, improving, thinking together and stuff like that. So hopefully that's the perpetual state, phase 4. And let's see, you asked one more. Network members can be individual orgs, additional elements. Have you found that the most network members relates? Most of the folks that use Partner CPRM are the nodes or organizations. Meaning they're doing inter-organizational network analysis. We have conversations every time we do this work about whether those should be people. If you do put the nodes in as people, as the map label, you just keep in mind, now you're doing an interpersonal network analysis, which is okay. There's nothing in the platform that doesn't let you do one, either, or both, or put resources or events in there. Just when you're interpreting the data, it's really important to keep that in mind so that you can interpret it the right way. Also, the questions that people ask are different among individuals versus an organizational relationship. Okay, last question here. I want to make sure we are answering questions, not just showing stuff. So this one says, so is the network data from the survey that is sent out to members, how are the relationships determined? Right. So that is how the relationships, let me move on too, because I haven't gotten to the good stuff yet. So the questions are how relationships are determined. There is an internal way if you wanted to capture like your perceptions of relationships, your own relationships with others, you would create a capture that says, I'm the respondent. I'm going to answer about my relationships. But yes, it's all through a series of the data captures. Okay, so let's get to the good stuff, the data here. So over here, I'm going to click on this button that says report. This is just like a live dashboard that always will exist within my capture, which is where I am now. It's always an updated version of my data. So if this is an open survey, it'll update all the time. You can download it if you don't want to see, if you want to capture it at that moment. But this is just a really nice accumulation of all the questions in here and how you might kind of start to do some exploratory analysis at the network, the systems level, or the population level, however you're kind of organizing your data. When I click on Analyzer, this will look the most different, I think, for folks who have used Partner before, and a lot the same, I guess, in some ways. But so here's our network maps, but I'm actually going to start with our charts and graphs. So one of the really unique features of Partner is that you do not collect data outside of the system and then bring it in. That can be a little bit confusing. The question survey function is embedded in here. So when I come over here, for example, if I want to see a bar chart based on either an attribute I brought in or or a question, it's here because it's in my ecosystem and I used it to collect the data. So you don't have to do any data cleaning. I'll show you how you can export the data, but the nice thing is it's just all here. So for example, if I said, what role does your organization play in serving young children? So this was a question asked of members of this ecosystem, and I can start to see the answers. I can see them as pie charts. This is a very fun kind of exploratory way to see the data. We've introduced crosstabs, which I'm very excited about. But let's see. Let's do, wait, I'm going to look for a different one. But if I look, for example, by primary org function, and then I see what I'm doing here, and then I want to see what role they play, I can do that. So for example here, sorry, I just picked the question, what city do you work in and what role do you play? So it's almost like heat mapping. I can start to see two questions here, and in city one, where most of their resources are. I'm thrilled with crosstabs as a researcher, so I'm excited about those. Tables are where all your open-ended data show up. So we don't really do analysis on that, but we just organize it for you like this across whichever questions so in this particular one, there's 4 open-ended questions. So they just appear here. You don't have to figure this out for yourself. We have this real neat question that we've been using. Oh, it's not in this one, where we are looking at, you can do matrix questions in here and see them across the different visualizations here. All right, so network scores are scores at the individual level. So for each one, we put some kind of network sciencey scores in here, but we also put in here so you can see, for example, who has the most partners that they've been nominated, selected as a partner for. We also have, for example, I mentioned our value and trust scales. We never use the word value or trust, but we use these proxy measures. And this is a scale we built about 15 years ago. It's been used in thousands of communities. But I always point out, I love this example, this childcare one. The way these are developed, these are averages of the scores on a scale of 1 to 4 of people who are rating each other, their partners. So what's really interesting, as an example, this particular organization was rated very highly by its partner on level of involvement and resource contribution. But you'll see 2 is a rather low score on power and influence. So something I've learned by working with communities is that almost always the most powerful and influential organizations are asked to facilitate and lead the network. It's like clockwork. Well, they're also being asked to lead everything else in the community. So what we often hear is that there is a fragmentation of these folks. They're not really moving the needle because they're just over committed. So we have had several real examples where we have tried to find little nuggets like this of an organization that might have really high scores on other dimensions, maybe low on power and influence, and suggested, let's move this organization into a leadership role and see, maybe we can move the needle a little bit more because they have a lot of involvement or resources to contribute. So this is just a quick little example of how you might take some data, a data point, and turn it into an action step. You can imagine going through this, all the different nuggets you might find in here. Okay, so just a few last things. The network maps. So again, all of the questions, whether they be relational questions, attributes, nodes, things like that, then they're all going to be over here, ready to be looked at. You don't have to figure that out. So in this case, let's say that I'm starting with this network, which I mentioned, an early childhood network in Montana. I can come in here and say, I want to look at them by, I've already selected here. There's this question we asked, what activities does your relationship include? So this is one that says, okay, you're connected. The NMS is like, this is where we just see who's connected to whom. There's different question sets here. This is our relational intensity question. Oh, and then there are, sorry, my dog, I'm so sorry. And then this question, though, I'm going to focus on, what activities does your relationship entail? So you'll see frequency questions, what the outcome of the relationship was, and things like that. I'm not going to get too into our measures today. But in this case, I might want to see, for example, who said they're sharing data and information. That's been something a lot of these communities are working on. So here I can see just the early childhood partners, but over here I have a filter by org type. I've tagged them by their org types. And I might be interested in how health clinics interact with early childhood clinic or organizations. So I like this example because one thing I know that happens is they are very siloed. You see the clustering of the early childhood groups and then the health clinics kind of over here. One thing also, the nodes are dark green, so it's a little harder to see, but I just introduced the schools into this map. And what I know about this community is these schools are really integrative. They really bridge all of these communities together. So that's been a really neat kind of thing. But I can also just say, you know, let me just see how the nonprofit community is working together with local health or schools and things like that. So it's a really nice way to be able to just really try to understand the sectors and who's working together around different things. But if I come back here, I've got these 2 groups, for example, and I might want to then, let's say, filter them by what city they are providing services in. So I can step through this and just see, like, who said, you know, they're working in city 5. So now I'm just looking at the relationships in this one particular city. So we can really use the filters to make sense of the data in lots of different ways. And also, you know, be able to aesthetically show things that are different, like I have the arrowheads turned off to help us make sense of these things. In relationships, I could come here and say, I'm interested in how doing by color, looking at how frequently they interact. So what you'll see here is daily is purple. So the health systems tend to work together much more frequently than the early childhood system members. So just really neat visual ways we can see this and start to make sense of it as well, but also to look for things like gaps, maybe service gaps and things like that. In this case, I like to show the postal codes. In this particular map, you can also kind of start to get rid of, I know that this is more of the, these two are the urban areas of this community. So now I'm looking at more of their rural map. So I can start to see where there are no connections. So we can start to build strategies to fill those gaps by understanding kind of where folks are located, what kinds of services they're providing, and things like that. One thing I'm going to do is I'm going to jump over. We have on our roadmap always new things coming. So I was just going to show you for a few moments, and then I'll stop. But some things that you'll see, just these are like our next things in the coming weeks. So for example, we've always had GIS. We're connected to ArcGIS in the platform. We just are hooking up the base layers. So you can do all your relational mapping here using all of the same features of finding the questions, but you can also integrate base layers that you're interested in. So that way we can click on them, see them, and be able to kind of, use that data to see if people are where need is and things like that. Two last quick things. Sometimes I might just say, who is this, organization that's connecting some of our other members here? I am going to. Oops, I turned the halos on. So what this is doing, I skipped over something, but these are the responses to questions like, what role does your organization play in serving young children? So we looked at that in the charts and graphs, but we might put advocacy and policy change. So the halos show us who says they do that. So now we don't just know their asset, their resource, but how they're embedded in network. So in this network, I can see there's only 3 folks. So if my strategy is around advocacy and policy change, amongst the health clinics in early childhood, only a few of them are doing it, and they're not really connected to each other. So great strategy opportunity here for building out some advocacy policy work. And lastly, if you click on one, you can just really isolate who they're connected to, but always click on the node, find out more about them, and then go to their member profile. So I'm going to go ahead and end with that. The last thing I just kind of wanted to touch on was talking just really briefly about some use cases, and one that we're really proud of. We've just started work in Jefferson County with Colorado Gives as the funder, and we've brought to them this concept that maybe we should stop collecting data one by one for different projects all over the same place, right? The same geographic place. They asked us to do some work around early childhood and workforce development. So our team came and said, can we instead build one for the county of Jefferson County that includes all its organizations and these specific use cases? So we've been working on this fall, and it's the first county-wide CPRM, which will be entirely public facing, built with partnership with community and funded by a community foundation. And the goal of that is to make it possible so that in a community, when someone says, I have a new early childhood example or idea, they don't go build a new network, but they go in and see the data that exists in that community and build on top of it, build in partnership with it. This has been something, it's like a dream of mine, I think, to have as many of these happening at the county and then state level, or wherever you are. We work a lot in Canada, but really to try to figure out, how do we find like one source of truth for these data? We have kids count data for kids and families in poverty, county health ranking data. We put so much money into networks and collaboration, and there's no one place that we all agree the data could go. So I would encourage you to join us in building that strategy at the community level. We would love to continue to help people build those out so that we can not ask communities over and over and over again for the same data. So that's a strategy that we have really been promoting at Visible Network Labs. So we're really open to that kind of partnership. So I'm going to quickly check into the question bank. Thanks for putting those there. All right, so I'll answer a couple of those, but if you can just turn your video on and ask me some questions as well. Okay, and I see Andy is actually answering some. So the centrality score is calculated. Peter, I would love to talk for a whole nother hour about our measures. One of the things is we're really proud. We know garbage in is garbage out. So one thing we know is that you can very easily put bad data into these things. And it's really important to us to have good data. The centrality scores that we have in there are like degree centrality, which is just based on the number of connections. We have others that we're building a key player analysis into this, which would be based on betweenness and closeness centrality. One thing we've learned though, we try not to overwhelm the user with lots of network scores, because most of our users are in communities and they're not network scientists, and it feels like overwhelming. So we do a lot of testing on what's kind of too much. Real quickly on the research basis behind the questions and scales, we've done a lot of qualitative research, like for example, trust. We started by doing interviews with people in networks and asked them, please describe trust. And we just got a lot of descriptions of trust. And we did a really strong qualitative process to come up with our kind of buckets of area for that. And so Andy came up with a really fun, awesome new question around resources that we've started to implement in some of our projects. And it's proving to be a great new question. So then we'll start to try to incorporate it into our question library. Okay, so Haley, you said you have data from 3 time points administered annually under the older version. Okay, so this is a great question. Not everyone is going to want to move their old data onto the new one. So we did not build a tool that automatically does that. So for anyone who is wanting to move their old data onto the new one, you need to contact us. We need a little time and we need to do that. So we thought it was better for us to spend our time building out the 2.0 than a system when a lot of people who have data in there will not want to move it over. Your data will always live in the database. It just may not live in the 2.0 unless you've contacted us. But we are asking everyone, if you don't have a subscription, to get a new subscription. And when you get a subscription to the Partner CPRM, we have changed it a little bit. You get to come on and do everything I just showed you: collect data, multiple captures, reporting, all of that. So although it's our subscription is about $4,000 a year, but we believe you get like insane amounts of value for that. So we hope that folks will find that also true. One thing I'll also add is we are asking new people to invest in and take an online onboarding class. And the reason that we're doing that is because we have so many users that need help or want some assistance. And you saw our team is about 12 people. So we absolutely can't help everyone. And so this is our way of kind of being able to stay sustainable, providing assistance and help for people without going under. Just any of you in small organizations will understand this. Until we get our big funder who wants to come in and pay for it all, we just are doing everything in partnership with our users. And so that's one way that we're also rolling out the 2.0, and we think it's going to be a really great experience for folks to be able to use that. Oh, sorry, I see there's a few more questions. Okay, Molly says, if we are in phase 2 of a large collaboration process, thinking this tool would be great to use, could we use the recorded presentation today? Yeah, we share everything. You can use this presentation. I'm happy to do a Thinking Like a Network Scientist talk for anyone, anytime. Andy and Alex are great at showing folks how to use things. So please use all of the resources that you can. And Molly, we'd be happy to talk to you about how to set something up. Thanks, Haley. Okay, I think I got all of those questions. The one last thing I will say, because my guess is a lot of folks on here may be like evaluators or consultants who do this work. We really want to be in partnership with you all to do this work. So we've developed a partnership program. It's kind of got all of the same asks that we have for our other users. The only thing that's a little bit different is we do ask our partners to put the CPRM in the community's name. Rather than you owning it. And that's just part of the philosophy. It's value-based for us that we really believe communities should have access to their data. And we've had some experiences where some evaluators kind of keep it, probably not in any malicious way, but really for their own. So we struggled with that a lot. And so we just said, you know what, we're just going to say you have to put it in your partners in the community's name. That also prevents you from building multiple communities in one ecosystem, which means they'd never be able to access it without seeing each other's. So it becomes a little more expensive if we have to set one up for each community, but it also aligns with us making sure communities can use the data. So I hope that makes sense. I'm happy to actually explain it in any other ways. Let me see if there's any questions. If anyone wants to just come offline, I know we're right at the end. We might be able to take one or two, not offline. If you want to just come off camera, did I say that right? Come on camera and ask a question.
Hi, team. Longtime user, lifelong fan. I love the work that you do. But just to verify, so if we've had, I have not logged in a year. I'm circling back to the use. We just need to request like adding our previous data into the new CPRM. Is that correct?
Yeah. And so Molly, honestly, I'll say like, you know, for those who have more data, it might be a little bit more time consuming than those that don't. But so there's a little bit of variance there. But we do ask, and we've changed the way we've done things over the years. And honestly, it's all just to stay sustainable. But we do ask everyone to have a subscription. So what we would say is, let's get you signed on with your subscription, which kind of tells us that you're serious. And then we'll spend our dev time to move it all over. And then we would ask is for some time, but you will tell us how much time you have, you know, and things like that. But our goal will be to work with folks one by one. Our developers have asked us to wait till January to start moving lots of folks over. That would be a more ideal time for us. You know, and lots of people are like, I'm ready right now when they want to use it. So we just try to be really empathetic while realistic. But yeah, Molly, why don't you get in touch with us and we can even sit down and just figure out what it is exactly you want to restart or do.
Okay, I will. Thanks.
Anyone else? Thanks, Andy, for answering all those questions. Okay, when I will answer that last one and then we'll say goodbye. Because I think it's really important. There's a question about onboarding. And this is, I don't know if I'm going to say your name right. Rakesh might have asked that one, I think. And or Rakesh, I'm not sure. But thank you for the question. We know that we've tried to make this as simple as possible, and yet we're still dealing with complex science, right? So it's almost like it's hard to do it first, but once you get it and you see it, you get it and see it, and everything follows with that. So the onboarding can be a little difficult at first, but then, you know, really the learning curve on that is really good. And so I think that people should expect to spend some time in the beginning muddling through a little bit and trying to make sense of it. That is why we've provided the online course, and it's meant to move you through that at your own pace. And so that's also why we're requiring the online course, because just the gap between people getting on and needing help to use it has been so great. The onboarding is a seriously necessary thing that we just really didn't know how to afford it, how to actually give people that in the most efficient way as possible. So that's why we came up with it as a course, and we'll be building out the course over time as well. But it's been pretty popular so far, and people have I think been really excited about it, because it's kind of also the balance between a full-blown project with us, which we do, and you being able to access it for what is more affordable. It's still a good investment, but it'll make it so that you can actually do your projects on your own. So, okay, well, I am going to say that's it. We're just a few minutes over, but I appreciate everyone coming. And as you can tell, we are informal and friendly, and all we want to do is support you and build capacity in communities to reach great outcomes. So I really do hope that you all will stay connected to us. Hopefully we'll be building out some of our community work as we go forward. And I do encourage you just to answer or ask us questions and really help us improve what we're doing all of the time so that we can make better products for you all in communities. So thanks so much. And we will send this out as a recording after, and hopefully hear from you all soon. But go in and register and go play with Snow White. It's fun. So we'll see you all soon. Bye-bye.